And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this evening. We have a magnificent guest with us tonight, one who is going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration, and that is none other than our Brother Stephen Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much, Brother Joshua, for having me on the show tonight. We've been discussing this for a couple of years, so finally I'm on tonight, and I'm honored to be on the anniversary week of the Day of Atonement Million Man March, being the Southern Regional Director in '95, and what we did and some of the things that have never been discussed publicly before, what we did here in Atlanta. And I've definitely love to get into it today.
All praises due to Allah. Yes, sir. And we look forward to hearing it. And before we get started, I'm very excited and humbled. But on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we want to thank you, Brother Stephen, for all of your sacrifices to help establish freedom, justice, and equality here in North America and all around the world. But your family sacrifice as well. So shout out to all your children, grandchildren. Shout out to Sister Margaret. We love you all, and we're honored that you all are taking time out of your busy schedule today, sir. And people and thank you everyone who's saluting you and showing you love in the comments on Facebook, and can't wait to upload this to YouTube. All right, Brother Stephen, the first question that we have for you, sir, is when did you first hear the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Well, I first heard the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad probably back in 1964. I'm from Chicago. My next door neighbors were Muslims. They were my best friends. And not next, they were 3 doors down. And they would talk to us about Islam and the Nation of Islam. Their mother was a teacher at the university, Muhammad's University in Chicago. They went to Muhammad's University, and they would talk to me about the KV, the Savage. And we were children. We were 10 years old. And that's when I first heard Islam in Chicago.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. And man, that's incredible. I never knew you were from Chicago this whole time. Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago, went to Lindblom High School, grew up around 57th and Normal. And that's the thing about when I think about it. I grew up in a laboratory, an experiment. I was raised on 57th and Normal. And it was the smallest public housing project in Chicago. It's called Washington Park Homes. And in this little project, the father had to be in the home. They opened up in 1961. The father had to be in the home. The mother had to be a homemaker. The only public housing project like this in Chicago. You know, Chicago had the largest public housing project, and we lived in the smallest. Back in 61, it was brand new, built from the ground up, and we were allowed to go in because my father worked. Well, when we got into this public housing project, there was across 55th Street was white. They integrated us. Everybody else in the neighborhood went to the black school, Sherwood. They integrated us into George Dewey. We were experienced. We had to go to the white school. We integrated the white school, the people from this public housing project in Chicago, 1961. Then we were given, tutoring after school.
Yes, sir.
Living in the public housing project and all of these things. But from that public housing project and the situation that they put in place was a lot of success. The first black sheriff in the South, Richard Langford, came from that area here in Atlanta. He was elected. A sister, she was very classy, beautiful. They were the Brewers. It was a very beautiful family. She went on to New York, became a dancer and a socialite, and she married a billionaire. She married Edgar Brofman Jr., the billionaire, Brofman's son. She married him, and she came from public housing in Chicago because of what they did with us in this public housing project. We had Citibank, the first black banker from Citibank, came from that. Most of the people that went on to be successful and did the things that they did, and it came from that neighborhood, including Richard Langford, who's here in Atlanta, who I was with him the other day. but he came from that neighborhood. All of us were public housing projects, the experiment that they did, that the dad had to be in the home, the mother had to was a homemaker, and they gave us all of these tutors. They sent us over to school, but it was the smallest public housing project in Chicago. And it was opened in 1961. Now it's torn down, completely leveled. It doesn't even exist anymore.
Yes, sir. Okay, great.
They were Chicago, normal to low. It's too hot now, but it was the smallest public housing project. I thought I would say that. But in that public housing project, as I said, there was a Muslim family. They were the Walkers. And if you go back to the first Muhammad University of Islam yearbook in Chicago, 1970, you'll see them. Madison Walker, Kenneth Walker, and their sister Cheryl Walker, and their mother was a University of Islam teacher. They lived there also. That's it, but it's in that book. And that's why I heard Islam in the 60s from them. But I did not accept Islam to 82 here in Atlanta.
Okay, yes, sir. Well,
I heard it from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, speaking at Brown High School, college. And so I heard him speak. And he spoke one night speaking at the Republic of New Africa Convention. And I went because I was president of Black Student Association here in Georgia. They put me on the front row. So I sat on the front row with Mabel Thomas, who was a state representative. They put us on the front row. I was the president. She was my vice president. We sat on the front row, and I went in with my arms crossed like this. 15 minutes in, my arms went down. 30 minutes, I was standing up clapping for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and the rest is history. That's how I accepted Islam here in Atlanta.
All praise due to Allah. Yes, sir. Beautiful history. Okay. And Brother Stephen, 1982, once you accepted Islam, how did your family and friends feel?
It was pretty rough because I was headed to a nice, when I got out of school, I was planning on becoming a lawyer. I was going to go to law school and become a nice Atlanta lawyer, nice bougie lawyer. And that was my plans for me and my wife. I was married in college. I'm still married to the same woman, Sister Margaret. And so our thing was, we had a plan. She was in marketing and she was going to go to New York. So we had our plan on what we were going to do with our life, 3 children and everything. So this was our plan. And I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and everything changed. And I went to the mosque. I heard him, but I went to the mosque 2 weeks later. And when I got to the mosque, it was the mosque at the time. The minister was Brother Hubert X, and the secretary was Van Muhammad, who became the minister here. So Brother Van was the secretary. It was his first night teaching Islam because he wanted to transfer from secretary to minister. So he was teaching that night. It was a Wednesday night. I came to the mosque to accept Islam. Brother Van was up there teaching, butchering the teachings, destroying it. But I didn't know. I stood up and I accepted. And he tells people to this day, the first convert I got was Brother Stephen. He was the first convert, my first night being on the rostrum teaching. And that's the night I came in and I accepted Islam. And I went from there. That was 1982.
Beautiful. All praises due to Allah. Incredible history. Yes, sir. And people are bearing witness. Thank you, everyone who is showing love and sending positive energy to Brother Stephen Muhammad. Yes, sir. Now, Brother Stephen, 1982, I didn't even know who Brother Hubert is. You know, may Allah bless him and his family, as well as Brother Stephen.
The brother the imam that just passed, Imam Sabir.
Yes, sir.
Sister Miriam's father.
Yes, sir.
That's Hubert.
Okay. Yes,
I named him. Yeah, he was Hubert X at the time. He was Hubert X. And then let me back up. My barber was Hubert 2X. So my barber, when I was going in the 80s or 81, all getting my hair cut, he would say, there's 2 Huberts in the Nation of Islam, and both of them are in Atlanta. Hubert X is the minister, and I'm Hubert 2X, and Hubert 2X was my barber. So Islam was all around. Brother Sylvester, who was the captain, he was selling eggs him and Eric Toure to my wife, and I didn't know that. So it's all around me. So it was destined for me to move toward the mosque. I just didn't know at that time. So I was doing my thing, going, as I said, going to school to become an attorney. I wanted to practice law back in those days.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wonderful. Man, all praise due to Allah. And thank you for this great history and testimony. My next question is, so when did you first meet the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
I first met the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It was 82 at the grand opening of the Final Call building. Remember, the Final Call building was small, so they said everyone, they didn't want people coming in from around the country to come to the Final Call building. I had plans to be in Chicago that weekend anyway, and so I went to the grand opening because I was in Chicago visiting my family, and I went to the grand opening. And at the end of the grand opening, he shook everybody's hand. That was the first time I shook his hand. Was then, and after that, I was dealing with him when he would come through Atlanta. I was the tape man. I did the tapes, so I would do the tapes, and Brother Joshua would come, and I would help him set up the tape operation. When the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would come to Atlanta, those were like in the earlier 82, 83. Then 83, myself and Brother Wendell opened up a restaurant. It was the first Muslim restaurant in Atlanta, near the mosque, near the stadium at that time, over on Georgia Avenue. We opened up the restaurant. Well, in 1983, Brother Abdul Allah came back. 1982, Rahman came back in Atlanta. 1982, Brother Abdul Allah went to Savior's Day. He came back. So I had the restaurant. We weren't doing much business. So after work, he would come to the restaurant and he would sit with me all day from probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 at night when I closed, and I might have 1 or 2 customers because we weren't doing much business. So he started coming over to the restaurant every day, and we would sit there and we would talk. Well, in July of 83, Minister Akbar came to Atlanta, sat down the staff. And when he sat down the staff and put Brother Abdullah in as minister, he came and he said, well, you're the secretary now. So what? Because we had been talking for a few months. He said, you're the secretary now. So now I get a post. I'm in the mosque less than a year. And so now I'm the regional secretary. He said, you're the secretary. So this is how this transpired. And I'm trying to get it fixed. I really want to get to the Million Man March because I have the special thing. So I really want to get to that. There's a lot, and I'll probably have to come back for it. So in 1984, when Minister Farrakhan started dealing with the Jesse Jackson campaign.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, after 83, so we're doing that. We skip up. So like early February 84, they had a ministers meeting, and Reverend Jesse Jackson had all of the big preachers, Clay Evans from Chicago, Wyatt T. Walker from New York, all of the major preachers that were supporting him came to Atlanta. We were at Jasper Williams Church. Jasper, a good friend of your father's.
Yes,
so
sir.
we're at
yes,
Jasper
sir.
Williams Church. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan introduces Jesse. And then he starts chiding all of the preachers. He said, what your problem is you're jealous of Jesse. He said, what your problem is that you don't know how to represent a man. He said, I've been representing a man all my life, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I'm going to show you today how to represent a man. So the whole thing was on how to represent Jesse to the people. And so this happened at the church. Went over well, we went from there. Well, Savior's Day comes up. This is early February. Savior's Day, 1984. Minister Farrakhan at Savior's Day, when he talked about the threat, he said, you're threatening Jesse. This will be the last one that you harm if you harm him. And we're not going to let you do that. This is Savior's Day 84. This is February 26, Sunday, 1984. Well, his speech to Savior's Day, second night here in Atlanta, that was his first speaking. He's speaking at Warren United Methodist Church on Ashby Street, which is Joe Lowry now. He's speaking there. We are that day. The reason I'm rushing to that, it's significant for three reasons. One, it's the first time we ever had a police escort for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. They get an airport tarmac pickup. We picked him up off the tarmac, and we had a chief rocker who was over the airport allowed us to do that. From that day, March 2nd, 1984 to this, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. That's one. Second thing was Dr. Collins, who had out of the blue here in Atlanta. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talked to him, and he told him that he was going to make him Minister of Defense. Never said Supreme Captain. He served in that role, but I was sitting there when he told Collins, I'm going to make you Minister of Defense. And that's what he said. Then the third thing was Brother Abdul Allah Muhammad. He came, he was sick, he had the flu, he wasn't there. He showed up in the room. And if I'm wrong about any of this, Allah, forgive me, and somebody can correct me on it. He shows up. He said, Brother Minister, he said, the ADL, the Jews met in New York Wednesday. They had a meeting. And in the meeting, they declared you the new Hitler. Not Black Hitler. He said they declared you are the new Hitler. That's what he's told the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And when he said that to him, he looked, he leaned back, and this is what he said. He said, Hitler, that's a good name. Like Hitler, I'm raising my people up from nothing, but don't compare me to your wicked killer. Then he said some other things that I'm not going to say. And he said that about it when he first heard you. He went that night, spoke at Warren United Methodist Church, and I'm saying this so people can look it up. That's March 2nd, 1984, and he addressed that they were calling him Hitler now, and it's at the end of the tape, he talks about it, and that was, I think, the first time he ever spoke publicly about being called Hitler, but that was here in Atlanta in March 2nd, 1984. That can be looked up because the tape, they do have it in Chicago, Final Call. Look that tape up, and you will hear him talk about, and I've never talked about any of this stuff public, but you can go hear him talk about being called Hitler in that tape. And from there, it has led to what we see today. But that night was in that hotel room, because they met that Wednesday in New York at the, and Brother Allah came and said, this is what they're calling you now, Brother Minister. He had the paper or something, and he told the Honorable Minister as far as contact. And I'm not saying that's the first time he heard it, but I know that was the first time it was addressed publicly, that that was his first public speech after Savior's Day during that year. And that was March 2nd, Friday, March 2nd, 1984, born at this church here. That can be heard on tape. If you go get the tape, you'll hear him talk about it.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wonderful. And thank you for this great history. Brother Stephen, two quick questions. We're going to skip to the Million Man March so that we can hear from your guest. But second, a lot of people are texting me saying that the Wi-Fi is acting up a little bit. Can we work on the Wi-Fi real quick or turn it like
I don't know. I'm on my phone. It's acting up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The Wi-Fi is.
I should have put it on my computer. I'm at my office today. We're having we do a food program.
Yes, sir.
Is it still? Yes, we do a food program, and today we're having a volunteer appreciation, and that's what they're doing on the other side of the building. So we have about 50 volunteers, and we're feeding them. We didn't want to do it yesterday during the Million Man March, the Day of Atonement, but we decided to do it today. And as I say, getting to that, the Million Man March, I was Southern Regional Director for the Million Man March, and we had a lot. We did a lot of things. And so we know that the march, it wasn't getting the support of the civil rights movement. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was coming to Atlanta September 8th. He was doing the final wrap-ups before we went into October 16th. So September 8th, 1995, he came to Atlanta. And we had events set up for him when he came to Atlanta. When he came to Atlanta, he went down to the state capitol. He spoke to all of the Black legislators, all of the Jewish legislators, the Speaker of the House, and other politicians. This was set up by Tyrone Brooks. We left there, we went across the street, and he spoke to all of the black members of the Atlanta City Council. And then later on that night, we went to see Andy Young. And then we did the informal. We had a luncheon at Ebenezer, Dr. King's church. And he spoke there to about 100 black clergymen. Then we went to the state capitol with Tyrone Brooks. Then we went to City Hall. And then we went to Andy Young's house. And we did an internet forum, which was the first internet forum. That's the technology center here in Atlanta. And we did a internet broadcast from the inform. But what I wanted to do was bring on Tyrone Brooks, who set up the speaking for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan with all of the politicians here in Atlanta. He was president of GABIO. And GABIO is the Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials. So it's every judge, every mayor, every city council, every commissioner in the state are part of this organization. He was the president, and he set it up where Minister Farrakhan was able to, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was able to speak to all of the politicians from the state of Georgia and to get their support for the Million Man March. And we went to the state capitol, we had this meeting, and we were having this volunteer appreciation today. And he showed up, just happened to show up. So this is not planned on the broadcast, but because we're at the Day of Atonement, the 29th anniversary, I just wanted him to tell what he did so your audience will hear what happened here in Atlanta and how we got it. Because behind what we did here in Atlanta, they did a whole issue called March Support Swells based on the work that we did for the Million March here. And Brother Tyrone was integral as a Georgia State representative and the head of GABIO. So I'm going to turn it over to Brother Tyrone and let him speak. So this is Brother Tyrone Brooks.
Hello, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, sir.
How are you?
Yes.
It's to be with my brother Stephen today. Good to meet you, and greetings to your father and family. Being with my brother Stephen today is kind of like a reunion. He and I met in 1979, but I'm just listening to him articulate history to you, and I'm remembering things that he just mentioned, like Warren United Methodist Church on Old Ashby, now Joseph Lowry. That was Reverend J.D. Greer's church. He was a part of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Operation Breadbasket. He was a state representative long before me. And then he mentioned Chief Rocker. That was Bobby Rocker, who was born in Warrenton, Georgia. He and I grew up together, and he died young, but he and I grew up together and, played in the streets in a little country town called Warrenton, Georgia together. And he later headed up to the Red Dog Squad under Chief Elgin Bell. Now, I met, Minister Farrakhan was over the Mosque on Bankhead Highway, and he invited me to come and speak to represent SCLC and Dr. Ralph Abernathy. That was years ago. But it's fast forward, to 1984 when Jesse Jackson asked me to chair his presidential campaign in Georgia. And Joe Beasley, who is my dear friend and Stephen's best friend in the movement here, we were the team that brought Jesse Jackson's campaign to fruition. But Minister Farrakhan called me up through one of his sons, as Stephen was articulating when he was in town in September of 1995, preparing for the Million Man March. We were in session at the state capitol, and I served 35 years on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives. The minister wanted me to join him for dinner at the Georgian Terrace Hotel on Peachtree Street, across from the Fox Theater. And when I got on the phone, the minister said, "My brother, I'd like to invite you over. We're having a little conference. We're talking about, how we can organize in Georgia. Reverend Jose Williams and Tim McDonald are already out there doing magnificent work." But he invited me over to the hotel, and I said, "Minister, you don't eat after 6 o'clock. It's after 6. And I said, "I want to invite you to the state capitol tomorrow." And he said, "Welcome." I said, "Absolutely. As long as I'm in the capitol, you're welcome." And he said, "I'll get back with you in 30 minutes. And about 30 minutes later, after conferring with his team, I'm sure Stephen was in the conversation, called back and said, "Okay, what time?" And I told him what time. Early that morning, I got up and went to the Capitol around 7 a.m. And all of the brothers were around the whole region, not just the Capitol, but they were at City Hall, courthouse. They were everywhere dressed to the nines, bow ties and sharp suits that I used to wear during the session. And Speaker Tom Murphy, the Speaker of the House, he saw me early that morning. He said, Representative, what's going on today? I see all those young men all around the region and they are really dressed. I said, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is coming this morning. And he said, really? I said, yes. I said, I've made arrangements and we're going to hear from him today as to why we should go to Washington, D.C. and have what we call the Million Man March. So we brought the minister in. And I had Representative Senator Diana Harvey Johnson, Senator Diana Harvey Johnson from Savannah, Georgia, who was chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, the Legislative General Assembly. And I happen to be the president of all of the elected officials from Congress, state lawmakers, county commissioners, mayors, judges, sheriffs. You know, Stephen articulated that. So I was the president of the bigger group, but I wanted her as a female to be sitting there with us. So we put Minister Farrakhan in the middle. She was flanking him on his left. I was flanking him on his right. And I introduced the minister. I said, tell us why we should go to Washington. And he did. And he articulated it very well. Well, the room was filling up with lawmakers. I mean, they came from everywhere. Christians and Jews and Catholics and Protestants. Everybody was coming. I mean, it seemed like the room was just the diversity of the world's religious population, plus civil ministers, and how Washington with a million men to atone for all of the things we haven't been doing right, and challenging us to stand up and be real men. And I said, who could argue against that? I mean, that cuts across every nationality, every ethnicity. It cuts across political boundaries. Everybody should want men to be real men and meet our responsibilities. Take care of your families, raise your children, you know, do the right thing in your communities. So the minister was very, very articulate for 2 hours. He had the audience spellbound. You could hear a pin fall on the carpet. He was just talking about why he was going to lead us to Washington. And he thanked me, of course, for committing. And I said, absolutely, I'll be there. Jose Williams and Reverend Tim McDonald had already approached me. And I said, absolutely. And so the minister, he laid it out. And there was no dissension. There was no arguing. There was no complaining about anything that he said. The media started coming into the room. The TV camera lights started lighting up the room. And my colleagues from every denomination started getting in line to want to take photos with him, but also wanted to get his autograph. So he was very patient with that big crowd. And I said, Minister, you have to be at City Hall across the street. You're running late. He said, well, Tyrone, I'm going to stay. He said, Representative Brooks. He said, I'm going to stay with you. They'll wait on me at City Hall. They'll be there when I get there. So I know he was over an hour late getting across the street to City Hall, and he spoke to the Atlanta City Council. And Brother Stephen has articulated how we went on to different groups. Mayor Andrew Young, Ambassador Andrew Young, Dr. Joseph Lowry, all of the giants in Atlanta just got in line. They hosted him. They committed to him. And so the Million Man March was one of the most rewarding experiences for me. I was happy to be there in the mix. I believe we had over 2 million men, and the crowd was very diverse. I mean, so many different groups from around the world standing there.
But one of the things the Jewish legislators, when yes. At state capitol, yes. You didn't talk about.
Well, absolutely. My brothers and sisters who happen to be of the Jewish faith, my friends who serve with me in the legislature. I grew up with Jew support in my hometown of Warrenton, Georgia. They were bound us out of jail. We went to jail. Many of them had marched in SCLC and SNCC and been killed along the way in Mississippi and Alabama. So they knew my connection to the Jewish community. They kind of trusted me in a way. So they came in and they were standing in line. I remember Michelle Henson and I remember Mitchell Kay. They were standing there and they were watching him. Minister Farrakhan was speaking and they were listening very intently. And after the speech, they said, listen, we are happy that we came to hear you firsthand, because it's different from listening to Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes denounce you, So they wanted to hear from him, and they did. And they stood there and they were very impressed. And I was so happy that they came, because I wanted them to hear from Minister Farrakhan himself and not be filtered through the media. The media never gives us a fair shake. They always twist and turn and do everything they can to divide us and to turn us against each other. But you could see that minister's message was bringing us together. It was not about dividing us, turning us against each other. it was like us coming together to be with each other as a family. And I was so impressed with that. That really impressed me. And I tell you what, when I got to Washington and I looked around, I saw some of my colleagues from Georgia who served with me in the legislature from every denomination you can imagine. And so it was a very, very, very good time for us as America and the world, because the world was watching DC. Over 2 million of us brought together by Minister Farrakhan and so many other religious leaders from around the world who were there. And I think it set the tone for us. He challenged us to be better at what we do, to be men. And I think a lot of us came out of DC, we came back to our communities, and we began to articulate the message on the ground, begin to do the things that he recommended that we do. And I think it made our communities better. We need another Million Man March. Over 2 million of us. I never saw anyone cursing at the Million Man March. I didn't see anybody drinking at the Million Man March. I didn't see anybody smoking at the Million Man March. There were some sisters there, of course. And, you know, the brothers were looking at the sisters, but they weren't acting up. They were, you know, the women said, we can't let all these men go to DC without us being there. So we respect that. The minister said it's a Million Man March, but when the sisters showed up, we respect that. And then I went back the next year for the Women Million Man March, March. And Brother Stephen articulated how we came together and how he took care of us. He had me and my wife in a hotel in Alexandria, Virginia. And it was really not a hotel, it was a condo in Alexandria, Virginia. I'll never, he don't remember, but I do. He gave us the key to this big condo. We stayed in the condo. They had a driver to come pick us up, to take us where we needed to go. I saw Dick Gregory. I saw Julian Bond. I saw all of these superstars from everywhere, Jesse Jackson, all of them around. And we were there. But the Million Man March was really kind of like the reconnection of the traditional civil rights movement to the nation and to Minister Farrakhan. And then fast forwarding, after the Million Man March, 1 year later, I called Chicago, got Sister Claudette on the phone. She knew who I was. She said, Representative Brooks, what do you need? I said, I need the minister to speak at the Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials convention in Macon, Georgia. She said, what's the date? I gave it last Saturday in October, 1996. Bill Clinton was running for president again. And we come into Macon, the whole world, it seemed like, descended on Macon again to hear Minister Farrakhan. Bill Clinton was there before we got there. He had a fundraiser. We came in a little late. Minister Farrakhan was at the Crown Plaza. We go into the Crown Plaza. I took some of my board members. We met with him for about 30 minutes. And the next day, the Macon Telegraph had headlines across the front page above the fold, Farrakhan in town to speak to Gabio, Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials. Down below was President Clinton in town for a fundraiser. And Macon is not far from Sandersville and Deep Step, by the way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Deep Step and Sandersville. So fast forward, 2005, the Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials was honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mrs. King, the legacy of the King family. We were honoring them at our convention in Savannah State University. I invited Minister Farrakhan to be the keynote speaker. He came. He brought Reverend Al Sampson and many, many other clergy from Chicago on a private plane to Savannah, Georgia. He spoke that morning to open us up for an hour and a half. During the luncheon, getting ready for the Kings, Martin King III and Reverend Bernice King was sent by their mother, Miss Coretta Scott King. She called me and told me she couldn't come because she was ill. So I said, Minister Farrakhan, the King family is on the way. They're flying in on Delta. Do you have time to speak during the luncheon? He said, absolutely. I'm in no hurry. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to speak during the luncheon and warm us up. He spoke for another hour and a half. And so the Kings come in and we present the accolations and the plaques and stuff to Martin and Bernice, and they received it. And the minister stayed around for a while. Then he had to fly back to Chicago. That Monday morning, I'm riding from the house going to Concerned Black Clergy's meeting, and Sister Claudette called me and she said, the minister would like to speak to you. Where are you? I said, I'm in the car headed to Concerned Black Clergy to thank them for coming to Savannah to hear Minister Farrakhan and be with the King family. And the minister get on the phone. The first thing he says is, my brother, how are you? I said, I'm fine, minister. He said, I do what you wanted me to do in Savannah. I said, you did exactly what we wanted you to do in Savannah. I said, the only thing we request in the future, whenever you come to speak to us, you have to speak at least 3 hours. he started laughing. He said, whenever you need me, however long you want me to speak, my brother, I'll do it. So I'm just giving you the kind of history and the kind of bond that we have developed with Brother Stephen and Minister Farrakhan and the late Abdul Rahman. I mean, I think that what people have to understand is people like me who grew up in the civil rights movement from the South, some of our relatives, like my grandmother knew Elijah Poole. And I didn't know who Elijah Poole was as a little boy until I got grown. She finally said to me, reading Muhammad Speaks one day, she said, "Do you know who it is on the front of this newspaper?" I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "This is Elijah Poole, but he's now Elijah Muhammad, and he heads up she called it the Black Muslim then. He heads up the Black Muslim in Chicago." I said to my grandmama, "Wow." I said, "You used to take me to their reunions down in a little place called Deep Step near Savannah." She said, "Yes." So the tradition and the history of my family being connected with the Pools, and then later on, Muhammad and Farrakhan, it all just comes in circle. And when I drive by this corner in Atlanta, used to be the Bronner Brothers building, now owned by Sister Precious Muhammad. She's in the nation, of course. I look up on her walls and around the murals, and I see Dr. King and Elijah Muhammad and Dr. Abernathy and Jose Williams and, all these giants in the midst of all of the leaders who have come through the Nation of Islam. So I'm just honored to be here with Brother Stephen today. He's a dear friend, and I kind of recruited him into the civil rights movement in 1979 when we were leading a boycott against the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And we've been together ever since in so many battles and wars that, I can't name them all, but he's a friend. His wife, Sister Margaret, is here. She's a friend, dear friend. She worked at SCLC with the late Randall Osborne at SCLC, and we're a family, and we're happy to be a part of the discussion today. I didn't plan to be here today, but talking to Sister Margaret, she said, "Come on by. We're having a little celebration for the volunteers." And she said, "I'm going to have you some cider tomorrow." She makes me this apple cider, and I'll come back tomorrow for that. But I just want to thank you for letting me intrude on your program today. Invited me on. Brother Stephen invited me on, and he said, "You need to be on. They need to hear from you." And I said, "I'll do it." But I didn't plan to be here. I'm just honored to be a part of your discussion on your podcast today.
Wonderful, sir. The honor is mine, and thank you for that great history. Sir, what advice would you give to the next generations and the future generations coming up about the value of us in politics?
I would say to the children, and I have children, I have my son and my daughter grown, but I have some grands, and I always talk to them a lot about my upbringing because they research me so much and they ask me these questions. And I always tell them, you do what you think is appropriate for you to charter your course in life. Don't let me tell you what to do, but I'll give you some advice. First of all, you must be grounded in faith and education. You must believe in what you're doing. And I want you to study your history so you'll know your history, so you can prepare for the future. Yes, I encourage my brothers and sisters to get involved in the body politic, but also encourage them to get involved in economic development. I also encourage them to get involved in what we call the spiritual movement. And if you want to be in the Nation of Islam, you want to be in the Baptist church or the Methodist church, or you want to be in, in a Jewish synagogue, you go do what you want, and you have, because it's going to be in your hands one day. You will grow up and you will inherit this world. We want to make this a better world for you, so you won't have the challenges that we have faced. You won't have the challenges that Martin Luther King Jr. and Elijah Muhammad faced. You won't have the challenges that Minister Farrakhan has faced. We want to make sure you understand that you have a responsibility to cast your bucket down where you are and make this a better world for your generation coming behind you, to make this a better world for your children and your grandchildren. And that's my message to them. I don't think children want to be preached to or talked to in a way that you're condescending. Just give them some advice. Let them know that whatever decision they make, it has to be on the positive side. And they have to be about the business of moving our people forward globally. We are connected globally, not just in North America, but around the world. And I say, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica. You have to be connected to that. And understanding that this is a small world we live in, and it's changing fast. And pretty soon, I tell them, your children are going to be visiting Mars and Jupiter. They're going to be flying to other planets, like we fly from here to Chicago and New York. And so that's my message to the children out there. Be positive, get involved in something positive, no negativity. Don't turn on each other, but turn to each other. Embrace each other and help each other. And if you don't have anything good to say about what we do, just don't say anything.
Yes, sir. Powerful. It was my honor of meeting you, sir. And God willing, I will have the honor of meeting you in person. I'm sure that Brother Stephen can assist with that as well, sir.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you, sir. Long live the spirit of Million Man March, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
It's an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Okay, yes, sir. Brother Stephen, they said, can you lift up the camera just a little bit? Like a little.
Is that better?
Yes, sir. That's perfect. And thank you, everyone who was watching. People will bear witness. So many people are showing love, saying thank you for this history. Thank you, Sister Miriam. Thank you, Sister Naima. Thank you to everyone, Brother Daniel E. Thank you to everyone who was watching. Can't wait to upload this to YouTube. Okay, Brother Stephen, we have a quick 60-second commercial break for all of the sponsors of the People's Podcast, and we're coming right back to our guests.
Yes, sir.
Boom. All right. Thank you. Here we go. All right, 1 second. Please let us. We are grateful for every like, share, subscription, every anonymous Cash App. Thank you very much.
Wahid, you're leaving us? You want to come sit in with me? Come on over and sit down with me, brother. Come on, sit down with me, brother Wahid. Come on.
And we are live with the People's Podcast. Street Premiere Media Production. He has a 4K camera and a drone. He does television and film editing. Please reach out if you need any of that. Sister Naima, Stay On Point Dance Academy. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country. Sister Miriam, ABC I Love Me children's book and coloring book. My father's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ. My two books, Cleopatra, which is a children's book, and No Father, No Excuse, both of which are available on Amazon. Perfect. All right. We're coming right back to our esteemed guests, as well as making sure that we remind everyone to support S Enterprise, Barber and Beauty Products, plant-based brush and wave company. They have a website, kosherwave.com, 770-997-6000. Brother Jeffrey, Circe Muhammad, to Stephanie Lasan Muhammad, please reach out to S Enterprise, kosherwave.com, 770-997-6000. We are back to our esteemed guest, Brother Stephen Muhammad, with some great history on the Million Man March. Brother Stephen, do we have another surprise guest, or you're just saying Brother Wahid's name is
I got another person. See, I do a food ministry here from where we are at my office here. And our food ministry is on the west side. We're the largest food ministry on the west side. During the pandemic, the last 3 years, we've given out 175 to 200 tons of food. We've given out lots of food. And the person that manages it for us is Sister Anaya, Brother Abdul Wahid's wife. She runs the food for us. And today was a volunteer appreciation. We didn't do it yesterday because it was the 29th anniversary of the Day of Atonement. So I don't do anything on that day. That's a day off for me. So we're doing it today. We're showing appreciation. On the other side, they're giving out food to all of the volunteers. So who came with Sister Anaya was her great husband, Brother Abdul Wahid. Muhammad showed up with her for this appreciation. So I asked him to just say a word or two because he's here today also.
Yes, sir. Something like a Brother Abdul Wahid Muhammad.
Salam, Brother Joshua. How you doing, my dear brother?
I'm doing phenomenal. It's always an honor to see you, my brother. Always an honor.
Well, this is not my program. This is Brother Stephen's program.
Yes, sir.
I just have to be here in support of it. And I just want to say one word in particular. Thanks to one person that I've cherished my whole life to. Is Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his divine servant, Mr. Louis Farrakhan. And I just so thankful to them both, keeping me here for the last 60-some years following this program. So Brother Stephen, he's one of the great regional secretary for two regions in Atlanta and New York.
Yes, sir.
So he's from Chicago. So I couldn't be better a better company to be in. Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Mr. Farrakhan, and Brother Steve. Of course,
Too kind.
And your father, Mr. Sharif, who helped the Minister Farrakhan more than anybody else. Because he has a whole statement. His whole statement is, you hear and obey. Mr. Sharif. So give him all the greetings for me. We thank you for this Million Men March. We thank you, Brother Joshua, for sharing the wisdom of the Nation of Islam around the world. And we pray that we can help you in anything we can. And I mentioned the same thing to your father. I don't know what you're going to do with all this information, but it's the history of our nation. We got to make sure the world knows who Pastor Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Mr. Farrakhan, and all those who helped him do this work. You know? So anything I can do to help, I'm sure even have the same concept. We're here to help.
Absolutely.
So first I want to thank my wives. Because it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here by ourselves. So our wives have helped us a great deal and help us. And anyway, thanks, Brother Stephen.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Wahid. We love you, Brother Wahid. We love you, Brother Wahid.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sister Naima, says Brother Wahid.
Give your whole audience the greetings, so Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sir.
Wow. Yes, sir. I think I'm sorry for all interruptions, but people are coming by, and so they have the history of this march and of what we're doing. As I said, Brother Wahid's wife, she is the backbone of the program, and he stopped by with her today for the volunteer appreciation, so that we would be able to show them appreciation food and some things for all of the people that have helped out, the city council people, everybody that helps out with this program and donates to it. We wanted to show our appreciation on October 16th, the Day of Atonement, and give back to the volunteers, because we give a lot of food out in the community here. And this is the community, the bluff that your dad opened up with the 10,000 feelers.
Yes,
and
sir,
we came in after this, but we've been blessed to be here. And I was speaking with your father yesterday. He called me. And I told him I wanted to talk about something, which is a deviation from this, about something I saw him do. And we were, it was 1994 when they attacked the mosque in New York. He happened to be in Atlanta when this happened. They attacked the mosque. He was meeting with the laborers in Atlanta to get some things straight. I think the Honorable Minister Farrakhan was out of the country. So he was here in Atlanta. He and Brother Sultan came here to Atlanta. I was not a laborer, but I was in the meeting because they needed some information from me. So I'm sitting in the meeting. And right when we're in the meeting, he gets a call. The police have attacked the mosque in New York. And the phone hangs up. His first officer, Brother Henry, called him on his cell phone. And back then, many people didn't have cell phones, but he had a cell phone. So they called him, said they attacked the mosque in New York. Whoa. And they hung up. And he kept trying to call back on the number, but he could not reach the number. So as Brother White said, I was the secretary in New York, and I was the secretary in Atlanta. So from 1984 to 1986, I did 2 weeks in New York, and I did 2 weeks in Atlanta. I would go back and forth as the regional secretary in both areas. I was under Minister Abdullah in New York and Brother Salih here in Atlanta. So I would go back and forth. So in 1987, Brother Akbar came, they made a change, and he became the minister in New York. And he had a heart attack. And after he had a heart attack, there was no laboring staff other than me. I was the only standing laborer in New York, the secretary. So I was the only laborer in New York. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan told me, he said, call me every other day and I tell you what to do in New York. So that was my job. I was the only standing laborer. And so he said he and Brother Salim came to New York for something. his cousins, something he came to New York for. I picked him up at the airport. But took him where he wanted to trip. And he said, we were in Brooklyn. Islam is supposed to be in Manhattan and not in Brooklyn. So I told all of my staff in New York, find us a building in Manhattan. So we found the building in Manhattan, 125th and 5th Avenue, that building that they attacked. So we fixed the building up. I was a secretary, but we fixed the building, we straightened it out, we renovated, and we moved from Brooklyn to Manhattan. I signed the lease on that building. So after we signed the lease, we were in this building, and we had the main room, and then we had 2 offices. One office was my private office because I was the only lady. So I had a private office and I had a phone in. Well, when they called and hung up and said that they attacked the mosque, Brother Sharif kept trying to call back. He could not get through. I said, brother, my number, I said, Brother Conrad is taking over my office. Brother Conrad, I saw him, he's on your show a few weeks, a couple of weeks ago. I said, he's taking over my office, and the private number there is 212, blah, 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 blah. I ran it down. He called. And when he called, Brother Conrad picks up. And he picks up the phone. And when he does, Brother Sharif asked him, well, what's going on up there? And he explained to him that 2 police officers had tried to come into the mosque. The brothers beat him, threw him down the stairs. And so I knew that building very well. And I was telling him the layout of the building. I said, yeah, where you come up the steps, you walk down this long hallway. On the left is a boxing gym. We're down at the end of the hallway. You make a right, and we have 2 offices. I said, I was explaining to your father the layout of the building because, as I said, I signed a lease on that building, and I knew that. And of all the places for him to be when they attacked the mosque, he's sitting in front of me. And I can tell him everything that's going on in that building because I know that building because I, along with the believers there, I fixed up the building. Got in trouble about that. That's another story. But anyway, so explained it to him. So the first thing he said was, they said, we got their gun and their police radios here in the building. We took their guns, they threw them out the building. He said, first thing you have to do is get their property out of the building because they can come in and get their property. They can come up in the building. So he walked them through. They said, get their gun and the radios and set them outside the building. That particular Sunday, Captain Dennis was not there. He just happened not to be there. But they had the expertise of Supreme Captain Abdul Sharif Muhammad. They had him on the phone. And he walked Brother Conrad and Brother Henry through everything to do to mitigate the situation. He explained to them to get the commander, the person in charge, get them on the phone. And he walked them through the conversation. He walked them to getting everything out the building. He walked them on how to keep the police out of the building. And I told him I was going to talk about this today. So I'm going to mention what you did because I thought it was so magnificent to see him walk through that. And as I said, he couldn't get through, but the private office that Conrad had was the same phone number. It was my phone number. So I remember that. He talked him through it, and we got through that situation. But he did a great job. He said he's going to put it in his book, what happened that day. And I said, well, I will mention publicly what I saw you do that day and how you walked New York through that. And had it not been for Brother Minister today, Student Minister Abdul Sharif Muhammad, they would not have gotten through that situation. I am a witness bearer. I sat there and saw him walk through it and walked them through everything they needed to do where the police did not raid the mosque. They had snipers across the street on the buildings and everything else, but he was able to tap that situation down and walk them through it. So the magnificence of that situation of seeing him work and do that and keep the believers out of harm's way, I think is something that the believers need to know. The believers in New York don't know because he was here in Atlanta calling and telling them what to do up there and directing the first officer and the minister, Brother Conrad, on how to get through that situation. So I just wanted to say that.
Beautiful history. Thank you, Brother Stephen. All praise due to Allah. People are bearing witness everywhere. Thank you, everyone who was watching. Can't wait to upload this to YouTube. People are saying teach, preach. That's right. Wow, never knew this history before. Thank you very much. Praise be
It's
to
a lot.
Allah.
Right. It's a lot of things that had happened. You know, when you're here in Atlanta, and see, out of Atlanta, we've had several national programs. The book Torchlight of America, that came when we were doing the Dome in 1992. The Honorable Minister Farrakhan was riding to the building and he saw the torchlight for the Olympics that was coming in 96. And it inspired him to write the book Torchlight for America. That came out of being in Atlanta. The Power Program. In 1984, when I was a secretary, Minister Farrakhan was here for something in June of 84. And we were talking, we were in the hotel room talking. And I said, well, Brother Minister, I'm going to have you 3 nights in 3 churches. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to put you in 3 churches and we're going to do this event. And he said, all right. He said, I said, I have the subject, I have the title for it. And then we went to the speaking engagement and he was speaking at the Afro-Americans Patrolmen's League National Convention. He spoke there. When we came back, I said, well, what's the subject, Brother Minister? And he said, I don't have it. It just slipped out. It's gone. I don't remember it now. So when he came back in September of 84 for this event, we did 3 nights. First night was on the west side at Chapel of Christian Love, Reverend Milner's church. Then we went to Decatur to Free Fall Baptist Church, which was Reverend Stafford. Then we did the final one at Wheat Street Baptist Church, Dr. Borders. And he taught the subject was the aim of true religion. He taught on the power of the church in economics and what the church needed to do to build and protect and save Black people. And he taught this in the lecture is called The Aim of True Religion. I can't remember the exact date, but it's September of 84. In the audience that night was Ken Bridges, the brother with the Wellington group, the one that was killed by the DC sniper. He was killed by the DC sniper, Ken Bridges. The DC sniper killed him, but he was in the audience that night and he heard the speech. So here in Atlanta, he heard the speech. At the time, he was a diamond distributor for Amway. He was the top Black person in Amway. So when it was over with, he came to me, he said, can I meet Minister Farrakhan? I said, well, he's gone, he's not here, because we taking him back to the hotel. So he went back to New Jersey, he got with Al Wellington, and they came up with this power program. From this speech, they was inspired. So how the power program started, they sent 1,000 of those tapes out to preachers all over the country, brought in all of the ministers. Brother Wahid taught them how to sell, and that was the creation of the power program. But it came out of the speech that the Honorable Minister Farrakhan gave here in Atlanta. The Torchlight of America came out of Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
The whole Jew thing, we heard it out of Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
So I'm not saying Atlanta. Back then, Atlanta was not important. The 2 important cities was DC and New York. So the reason that I even went to New York, I wanted to go to a big city because I'm in Atlanta. We had 20 FOI. That was it in 84. And so I wanted to get to the big city. So that's why I took the assignment of 2 weeks in Atlanta, 2 weeks in, and I was back and forth. And I just wanted to be in a big city in New York, Utica and Eastern Parkway. When I saw 400 believers on a Sunday at the mosque, I said, wow, this is Islam. In Atlanta, we had 40 on Sunday, 50. And that's why I wanted to be in New York and be a part of it when Brother Abdul asked me would I come up to New York with him. But the power program came out of the speech that he gave called The Aim of True Religion. And it was a great speech. And that was the first time that I spoke with your father. He had the tape connection. And he called me. He said, Brother Secretary, he said, do you have the video? And I told him, no, all we had was the audio because I didn't get it video because the video crew at the time wanted to charge me $400. I thought that was too much money. And I didn't get it videotape. So all we had was the audio. But he wanted, because he said, it's the hottest selling tape that I have. And I need the video. I said, we don't have a video. And that was our first conversation. It was by the phone about that subject that I had with my brother, Minister Sharif. So I'm just sort of going through things.
Yes, sir.
About what happened and what I went through, because I know that our time is about up. And I really would have to cut it.
Take your time, Brother Stephen. Take your time.
And so it's up. But going back to the Million Man March, we had a thing. So after the march, we had a reasonable degree of success. And when they were talking about the state troopers wanting to stop the bus, what we had came up with in Atlanta was that we wanted to have a caravan. We said the South gonna come in, the Southern region gonna be the strongest region, and we're gonna come in real strong. So I had Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and we were gonna come, in North Carolina, we were gonna take the buses and everybody would drive. And so Florida would come up 95, then we would all meet on 95 and we'd all come in. And I said, we're gonna have 1,000 buses strong coming from the South. And this was our way of coming into the Million Man March. And then that's when Dr. Ben said, no, they're gonna stop, caravans, they're gonna stop buses coming, and probably told me that we couldn't do that. But that was our way of coming in strong, just to show we were gonna represent. The South was gonna represent, and we were gonna come in strong. Well, we did all of this. So after the march, CBS Sunday Morning called me, and they said, we want to do an interview with you. We'd like to come in Atlanta and film you and see what you've done. Because there are 300, this is what they said to me, there are 350 LOCs in America, and you have the most successful one when it comes to Black clergy and civil rights leaders. And we want to come and film you and see what you do. I was a little hesitant. I said, nah, I don't really want to do that. Because they might hijack me and, CBS Sunday Morning. I said, no, I don't want to do it. But I called to Chicago, talked to Sister Sophia. She talked to Honorable Minister Farrakhan. He said, do it. I said, okay. So I did the interview. CBS came in, they spent 3 days with me. But still, I was still a little hesitant. So I had my lawyer call CBS. I said, you talk to them and see what they're going to do. And I don't want them to send Leslie Stahl or one of them type of people in here, one of those folks that's going to hijack me and make the whole march look bad. So he called. So my lawyer got back to me, Michael Washington. He said, well, bro, Steve, I talked to him. And he's gone now, Mill. I'll be pleased with him. But he's a country boy. He said, bro, Steve, I talked to him, and I talked to CBS, and they told me the reporter they're going to send in is Randall Pinkston. And he said, you're not going to, he said, you ain't going to have a problem. I said, why? He said, he was my college roommate. And so you won't have a problem. So the reporter, they was lawyers, and he talked to him. And so he already told Randall Pinkston came in and just talking to me and just seeing what we were doing. They interviewed Dr. Lowry, Jose Williams, Coretta Scott King, and different people. Well, when the Honorable Minister Farrakhan came in that day and spoke to the legislators and the Black politicians, that night, we had called. My wife called Andy Young's secretary and said that Minister Farrakhan we'd like to set up a meeting for him. And he was in Saudi Arabia. And she said, he's in Saudi Arabia, but he'll be back at 8 o'clock tonight. And he said that you can come to his home and see it. So that night, we went to his house. So the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, Supreme Captain Ministry, Brother Mustafa, we all went to Andy Young's house that night. And he spoke with Andy Young. So he spoke with every civil rights leader that was still alive at that. C.T. Vivian, Andy Young, Jose Williams, Joe Lowry, James Orange, all of Dr. King's lieutenants that were around, spoke to them to get them on board with the march. Spoke to everybody except Miss King, Dr. King's wife. She wouldn't. But he gave me a message to give to her. He said, well, tell her this after you leave. He said, tell Miss King that the Million Man March is not trying to overshadow the 1963 march. He said, that's the mother of all marches, but we are her sons, and we're going to Washington, D.C. to demand a payment for that canceled check and that bounce check that Dr. King talked about. That was the message he told me. I never gave it to her. I gave it to her son, Martin, and he told her, but I did not ever get a chance to give it to her face to face. But that was the message that he left, that we were not trying to overshadow that march, because that was part of the problem at that point. Everyone felt that we was trying to overshadow. That's the civil rights leaders here in Atlanta. That was the whispering and the undercurrent. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had to come in. He had to quell that. He had to meet with all of these brothers and show them that that march, we're just trying to come in and to dovetail off of that and to build further as Black men.
Brother Stephen, we can't hear you, Brother Stephen. Thank you, everyone who's watching. We're waiting on the sound to come back. Brother Stephen, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, sir. You're back. We're listening.
Okay, I can hear you. So the sister, she was a reporter. She was an independent reporter, but she wrote the article that was in Essence magazine, October, going into the Million Man March. So she told Minister Louis Farrakhan, I have 13 questions to ask you. She said, go ahead. We're sitting in Brother Jamil's office at the Mosque over on 19 Joe Lowry now, but 19 Ashby. So we're sitting in his office. And so she asked the question. So the first question she asked was, Muslims don't protest. Why are you all going to Washington, D.C.? And he said that we're going to Washington, D.C. because historically, all of the laws, all of the oppression that has put Black people under subjugation have come out of Washington, D.C. So we're not going to protest. We're going to atone with our women, our daughters, our mothers, our wives. So we're going for an atonement. So this is not a protest. He said, so we are going to show the world that we can be Black men. And he spoke on the atonement. And Dr. Bevel brought the atonement to this march. Because if you remember how it started, the minister was saying, we're going to march in like soldiers in ranks and we're going to do this. And so that was the original 1994 conversation that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was having. Well, Dr. Bevel brought the atonement. Dr. Bevel was the architect of the civil rights movement strategy. He worked for Dr. King. So he was the one who brought in the nonviolent strategy, Dr. Bevel. So Dr. Bevel's daughters and ex-wife lived here in Atlanta. So once a month he would come through Atlanta and I would see it. Sometimes he would call me, pick me up, brother. And so I would ride around with him, talk to him, take him to see his family, taking whatever he was doing here in Atlanta. So Dr. Bevel on the atonement. And so he told me, he said, look, we have to do 20 atonements. And when we do 20 atonements, and 10, 10, 15 was the 20th, he said, we do 20 atonements, and then we will reconnect with God. And once we reconnect with God, we will then have the power to change America. That's what he told me in 1995 after the march. So we got to do 20 of these. So we've been doing, now we're at 29. So we have to do 20 atonements. He said, how you can justify this is that if you look into scripture, the book of Job, he said, when you see in the book of Job, it starts off, Job's sons had their houses and they all were having dinner. His 3 daughters and his sons were having dinner at his son's house. And they would go to each one of his son's houses in scripture.
Yes, sir.
And have dinner. And he said that Job had to atone with the women in his life, his wife and his daughters. So Job went through his trial with God and the things that he went through. 41st book of Job. Then they talk about how Job, his daughters had their houses, his sons had their houses. And he said, then Job atoned with the females in his life. And behind the atonement, gave them houses, gave them land when he was blessed with more. So that then now he was right with God and he could atone. And that's how he was blessed, because he started treating. So he said, that's the basis of where he brought atonement in. And we had to atone for our women. So this is the conversation he and I were having back during that time.
Yes,
so
sir,
when
yes,
I
sir.
did interview with CBS Sunday morning, that's what I talked about, atonement. When I did the interview, they called me for Nightline. I didn't really want to do it, but all of the interviews and things I did locally, it came from the position of atonement, because he said that this is the way that we can make happen the transformation and the transformative power for the Black man is we had to atone with our women, taking it from the book of Job and scripture and atone, and that would give us the power to transform America. And so that's how he brought atonement to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. That was his basis for it. And I've heard people talk about it, but I'm just giving what he said to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
About atonement, so that we all now can understand his perspective. Now, naturally, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan took it to a higher level, but that was his basis of atonement. And how, the second Chronicles 7:14, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins, heal their land. So, but all of this is what we would discuss because we start having study groups. And we would have the study groups for our LOC. When he came to town, we'd have a study group and we would speak on atonement and what we needed to do. And Brother Darius, Sister Ava, they lived here then, and Brother Darius would come to the study group. So you're gonna ask him, he came to some of the study groups with Dr. Bevel, and we would have these discussions back in those days, 95, 96. May Allah be pleased with Dr. Bevel and what he brought to the Million Man March and what he brought to the 63 March and Dr. King and the movement and his contribution to the onward struggle of the Black man and woman. And those are the strategies, because he was really a scholar and scriptural scientist, and he would go through stuff and he would always bring out where it was in the Bible and how he justified the position of what we had to do in order to change and reconnect with God and get back and take our religion, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and get back on the right track, God. And so those were 95 and what we got out of 95 and the things that happened there. So the Southern region, we did our work. As I said, I've never talked about any of this public, but it's verifiable, it's justifiable. And that's what we did down here, because I think it was December 5th, 1995. It was called After the March, and it was a segment on CBS Sunday morning. And that's, you can look it up. It's out there, and it's about the work that we did here in Atlanta to bring in the civil rights leaders and the Christian preachers, and how we did that and how we pulled that off with people like Tyrone Brooks and Reverend James Orange and Reverend Tim McDonald and all of the ones that came on board, because the call was so clarion and clear by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. All the Black men in Georgia wanted to be a part of it. Now Dr. Lowry, and I'll say this with SCLC, he wasn't with the march, but all of his chapters were getting buses and coming up to the march. So he got drugged. So that was a clear example to me of the leadership being drugged by the people. They said, we're going anyway. Bishop Eddie Long, he did the press conference to denounce it. His men said, we got 5 buses going up to Washington, D.C. Everybody was headed to Washington, D.C. And so the preachers that denounced it, Dale Bronner, Bishop Jakes, and all of them, they had to repent and apologize. And one more story with Representative John Lewis. During the Million Man March, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came in here in 1994 to do the men's only in May. Atlanta had the largest men's only rally. It was 20,000 at the Omni. So we had the biggest indoor rally. I think more people came out in Houston, they couldn't get in, but Atlanta had the largest indoor rally. So we had all of the people, they came that night. Well, there was a young man that was going to Washington High School, young boy, 16. And he had to do a story on a book report on a great man. He chose the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He came to the men's only that night. Going home, he was walking through an alley, and a young boy came up to him, robbed him, and killed him, shot him. And then when they caught the young man, they asked him, "Why did you do it?" He said, "Because I wanted to see somebody die. I want to see how it feels to see somebody die." That's what he said. The young 16-year-old boy. Tragic, terrible situation. Minister Van called the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and told him what happened. And he said, "I'm going to come in and do the funeral." The family wanted the minister. He came in and do the funeral. So the Supreme Captain, Minister Sharif, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, they came back that Saturday to do the funeral. Happened on a Monday, they came in that Saturday. So back then, a 16-year-old killing in 94 was an anomaly. Now it's a common everyday thing. It was an anomaly. So this was big. So all of the politicians, the mayor sent his staff. John Lewis flew in from Washington. It was such an anomaly that all of these people come to the funeral. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is doing the funeral. This is the men's only. So he comes in, he does the funeral. He talks about it. And if you ever heard Derek Bozeman's show where it starts off with the minister's voice, it's from that particular eulogy that he did, that they play this on the radio every day. It played on the radio when he talked about Black Atlanta. So John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis came in, and that was he and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's first time meeting. And John Lewis had been attacking us constantly. But they met. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came in, and it sort of changed the thing and of what was being talked about at the men's only about the killing and young people killing. So that particular situation hit home. So he came back for that. He did it, and it was such a magnificent funeral. It was here in Vine City, where the 10,000 Fields was based. It was done at this church, and that's where all the killing, everything happened. So we were able to take that, and that was the basis of getting the leadership. Said, if we don't have a men's only march in Washington, D.C., a Million Man March, we will never be able to stop and turn the tide of what is going on with our young Black. After that, 1.9 million Black men registered to vote. After that, that's what got Clinton back in. There were so many adoptions that were taking place all over the country at that time. I think 25,000 adoptions happened the first month of Black men going home to do that. So when I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say, go join an organization, the NAACP and all of that, I thought that was something he was doing for the march. But when I was talking to Brother Wahid, who processed in Boston in 1960, he said that in Boston, part of the curriculum when you processed and came in, they told you to go join an organization. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan been doing this. I didn't know this. And he explained to me what he was doing in Boston. He said they would join different organizations. When you came in and you processed, you would join organizations, and then the Muslims being an organization would have the power to influence the NAACP, the Urban League. Because he said he joined the NAACP because he was told to go join an organization. And that's how that happened. So 35 years later, I thought it was new, something that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was saying, but he said that went on in Boston in 1960, which shows the progression, how progressive the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was, even back then. And it was just so much. And even with him, with what we're doing with prayer now, and I'll say this, and I'm going to get off this podcast. But Brother Abdullah, he was made the minister in LA in 1960. So when he was made the minister in 1960, he said Malcolm would come in and say, well, who do you want to speak? And he said the first person he told him was Brother Lewis from Boston. I want Brother Lewis to come in and speak. And he said, Malcolm told him, no, we're not going to send Brother Lewis. He sent somebody else in. He sent Lucius. He said, I want Brother Lewis to speak. And he sent somebody else in. He said, finally, he sent Brother Lewis in to speak. And he said, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came to Los Angeles to speak, he taught on prayer, the positions of prayer. Of how when you Allahu Akbar, how you surrender. and this submission, and you had your hand. So he taught on Salat when he first came, and he said he turned it out. He said it was he said that was the best one out of all of them that Malcolm, he said he got a better response than Malcolm did when he came to Los Angeles, when coming in and teaching what he did. So he was always special, according to people. And the reason I say that is because 1982, Minister Farrakhan came back. 1983, Abdullah came back. 1984, Lucius B.I. came back. 1985, Troy B.I. came back. They all came back to Islam in Atlanta. So they all taught their first lecture. This is where they all came in at. All of them were made ministers by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I used to call all of them the Four Gospels. And I think B.I. is the only one left in Miami. And he, I said, the Four Gospels, let me get your opinion on this. The Four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke, talking about Jesus. And this is what I would always say to them. And I was blessed to know all of them. I was blessed to see their first lecture when they came back to Islam. And that was the thing that motivated me to kind of look at it and all of them and I wanted to know, how was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as a young minister? What did he do? And the things that he did, I look now and some of us aren't doing them to this day. And I would say that we need to go back and study his history of how he became who he was, because these were men that watched him and looked at him, and I would ask them all the time, well, what did he do? How did he do it? What was he doing? And as this is 60, 61, 59, 60, 61. What kind of brother was he back then as a young minister? And he was always special. And he always did things that were more progressive and more upscale than the other ministers. And that came from all four of them, the four Gospels, who looked at Jesus and saw Jesus. And these were the four ministers that came back to help the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that were made ministers by the Honorable Elijah, most Honorable Elijah, those four. And they were the four Gospels. And they all came back here in Atlanta by the grace of Allah. So Atlanta is a special place. And even now, with people like all the national laborers that live here, from your dad, Brother Wahid, Brother Akbar, you have all of them here. And the counsel that they give, and I can call them just to see what it is that we should be doing compared to where we started, compared to where we are today. So it's a great place to be here in Atlanta. I love it. And I thank Allah that he brought me here from Chicago. And this is a different kind of place. So I think I need to kind of stop, because I missed a lot. There's a lot I could fill in between of my days in Islam, from the Dome and how we did that, all of the events that I've been involved in here in Atlanta, that and Madison Square Garden. I guess I'll end with Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
I was the secretary of Madison Square Garden. I was the secretary. So that morning, the thing that was unique about Madison Square Garden, that was the first time we sold tickets. Brother Leonard pushed that. We sold tickets for $2. But then every event was free. So Leonard pushed that. We sold tickets for $2. Brother Allen, and I'll say this so publicly, those in New York, Brother Allen sold 3,700 tickets. He was the #1 ticket seller. Sold 3,700 tickets for Madison Square Garden. So Madison Square Garden. So that morning, we all at 10 o'clock, we go over to Madison Square Garden. By then, I think Brother Wazir, he was the national secretary. He had replaced Brother Wahid. So Brother Wazir is national secretary. And he's out of New York. So he's from New York. So I replaced him. So he was there. So we were inside the building. We were separated. Brother Sterling had his people. We had the secretaries. Sister Trina had all of the MGT, and we were going over the game plan of what we would do to make Madison Square Garden happen. So as we got closer to 4 o'clock, the time we was gonna start letting people in the building, it was nobody hardly there. What we found out, it was 50,000 people outside trying to get in, and the police were riding around on horseback telling them it was full, you can't get in, to leave, trying to run the people away. Mayor Koch was on TV talking about don't go. And so it was a lot of controversy around it. Well, it was so overwhelming when all of these people came that Brother Sterling took all of the people that I had set up for the secretary to collect the charity. He took them, put them on security, doing door check, because we didn't have any people. So now when it's time to collect charity, I don't have anybody. So the national secretary at the time, Brother Wahid, came and said, Brother Akbar is going to start collecting charity in 15 minutes. You need to have people. I said, I don't have anybody. So Brother James, who was my assistant, who replaced me as secretary in New York and became Brother Akbar's assistant over in Ghana. So Brother James, he came to me, he said, brother, there's a bus from Philly of believers, because they closed the building down and nobody else could get in. He said, there's a bus load in the alley from Philly. He says a bus load from Philly, they're late and they can't get in. I said, where they at? Take me down to them. So we went down in the basement in the back, Madison Square Garden. We get there. I go out and I get on the bus. I said, who's the sister lieutenant? Sister raised asked, who the brother lieutenant? Who the highest ranking sister? Who the highest ranking? Come here. I said, look, you all cannot get in this building, but I will let you all in if you collect charity. If you help me collect charity, I'll let you all in the building. They said, okay. I said, all right. I said, get your assistant, sister lieutenant. And Mel, I'll forgive me. I said, check her. We went inside the building. I said, check her. She said, we can't check that brother in front. I said, if you don't check her, you won't get in. Get the hell out of here. That's what I said. I got to have this charity collected. So they checked each other. I had the lieutenants, the two brothers, check each other. And then everybody else was checked coming in. I gave them the buckets. They collected the charity. We did not get any charity from the top floor. All we did was the ground floor. I sent Brother Ramsey, who's here in Atlanta. He was my assistant in Atlanta because I was in both places. I put Brother Ramsey over Felt Farm to collect the charity. And I gave him 10 people, and he went to Felt Farm and he collected charity there. And then I had Brother James assisted me, and we did the charity in Madison Square Garden, of which we did not get the top rows. Brother Akbar collected charity. All we got was the bottom, because all I had was 40-some people that were on that bus. 30 in Madison Square Garden. I sent 10 over to Felt Farm. But that's how we collected the charity, was those people from Philly. And we were able to get it done when it happened. So that's another story I never told. That's what happened. Brother James will bear witness. You can ask him. That's what happened, because he brought it to me. But we had to get the job done. And I apologize to that sister who I told them to check each other in front of me. I apologize. Whoever they are, I apologize to you. But I had a job to do, and my thing was to get the job done. And that's what we did. And I'll sort of leave it there in terms of what, because I'm
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I just want to thank you. And Brother Stephen, inshallah, for part 2, if need be, I can come to the office, or we can do it again virtually. We just got to make sure this happens. This is great history, sir.
Yeah, we probably need to do it better. I do it at my office. We can do it there. We can sit down and just really talk about the details of Atlanta and how Atlanta was built. And now Atlanta was a little country town then. Now everybody wants to move to Atlanta. But back then, Atlanta was just a country place. Nobody wanted to be here in what we were doing. So, but now there are a lot of stories and the tie-ins with the Jews and Maynard Jackson and the things that we did that had national implication. But at the time, we did not know what we were doing. We were just doing what we had to do. As I said, I was in my mid-20s and I'm working, and I'm doing 2 weeks in New York, 2 weeks in Atlanta. And I'm trying my best to do my best. And I made a lot of mistakes, did a lot of things wrong. But I thank the council of Brother Wahid and others and what they helped me do, to the things that I did do right. And he was very instrumental, because he always, even to this day, keeps my head on straight. We talk regularly on a daily basis. And I always thank him for what he does. So I want to thank him and Representative Tyrone Brooks for what he did when he had the minister come down to the Capitol. And he didn't mention, but even the Jews stood in line to get the minister's autograph. They took pictures with him and got his autograph. Because they said that this was not what we see on TV, the Jewish politicians here in the state of Georgia. So all of that was a part of that 30 years ago. And there was an issue that came out after that. If you go get the issue, it's called March Support Swells. And then you see the Honorable Minister Farrakhan with a picture with Andy Young and all of the things that we did here in Atlanta. And that was the beginning. That was a month out, September 8th. And we did this, and it swelled to where all of the civil rights leaders, all the preachers, it's sort of jailed here in Atlanta. They all came on board. They had been talking negative against it. They came on board. And from there, it took off with their support. It was already going to be a success. They came on board because they saw what it was going to be. And he was able to get to them here in Atlanta, all of the big names, and Andy Young, and Joe Lowry, and Jose Williams. They all talked to their civil rights peers and told them, we got to get on board with this. This thing is going to happen. It's going to be big. And that's what it was. And I thank Allah that he gave me a small piece in it to be able to play a part in the Southern region. And I want to thank Brother Curtis, because Brother Curtis recommended me for the job. Brother Curtis recommended me to do the Southern Regional. And I thank you, Brother Curtis, because it was Brother Curtis. And I was not a laborer. And I said, Brother Curtis, I'll do it on one condition. All of your lieutenants, all of these assistant ministers, all of you, they cannot say anything to me. Only person I'll answer is you. You and I talk about what I do to make this happen. Everybody else keep them away from it so that I can get this done. And he did. And so I thank you, Brother Curtis, for that and what you did. And from that, we had a degree of success. So as I said, Nightline, everybody called. They wanted, after CBS, they wanted to do a piece on Atlanta. I wouldn't do them because I said, well, that one piece went well. I don't want to mess it up. And I didn't do any other than local things. I did a lot of local stuff, but I didn't do any other national television broadcasts after.
Excellent. Yes, sir. Well, thank you. And on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we salute you and honor you, Brother Stephen, for all of your sacrifices. Thank you very much. And thank your family again. Thank your grandchildren. Shout out to the great driller, Sister Tinetta. Thank you to Sister Fatima. Thank you to Stephen Jr. Thank you, of course, to Brother Yusuf for always showing love. And we will never forget Sister Margaret. We can never thank her enough. We honor Yusuf. And thank Yusuf's children, everybody else's children. We don't forget them. Tinetta grew up in the mosque here, so I get to see her all the time. But thank you to everyone.
She just came in. So she just came in and tried to wave at me. So Tinetta just came in, the driller. Her mother was a driller also. And I have to thank, it would not have happened to me, remember, had it not been for my wife. I thank her. She assisted me all throughout. My wife was the biggest help that I had during the Million Man March. She went to Washington, D.C. I didn't make my flight for the Million Man March. It's a lot more I could tell around that story before and after the time that I was there in Washington, D.C. and the LGBTQ plus community came and they said we need to be represented. I was at that meeting in D.C. at the LOC. It's a lot of stuff that happened because I spent a lot of time on that. I gave it my full attention for 90 days prior to the march. I was every day at the office building, trying to make it happen so that we could. And we did not know that we were considered. And I just wondered, how did the devil know we got 350 LOCs and said that we were the most successful? I didn't understand that, but that's what they asked. That's what they said to me when they called us. Didn't understand that, but it tells you that the universal snooper, the white man, knows everything that we're doing. And that's what they said. And they could have been wrong because I don't know if we had the best or not. All I know is that we did what we did, and everybody around the country has a story. And there are a lot of great stories tied to the Million Man March. We were just blessed that they put it on the white man's tube, and so they broadcast our story. But everybody had a great story that they did, because if they didn't, we wouldn't have had a great march. Thank everybody that participated, all the brothers and sisters, and I thank my wife for all of the work that she did. She worked hard to make that event happen. And I thank your audience for allowing me to get on and just talk about history. But life is not history. Life is the future. It ain't what you used to. It's what have you done lately? And so that's where we are today. And it's what have we done lately? That's the path. It was 30 years ago. Thank God I was blessed to be a part of it. And I pray that Allah give me some more years like Brother Wahid and Uncle Minister Farrakhan, so I can do something else that I can get to 90. And we are going to have we're going to have a celebration for Brother Wahid.
Yes, sir.
Flowers While You Live, 90th anniversary. So everybody listening, to take a note, we're getting the date, and we want you to come into it. We're having a celebration for him. I ain't gonna say everybody. We're having a celebration for Brother Wahid. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a 90th birthday Flowers While You Live celebration. That's what we're gonna do here in Atlanta. And we want to celebrate him here in Atlanta for what he did. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, well, yes, sir. Well, Brother Stephen, please keep us posted because People's Podcast, perhaps we can go live to make sure that we promote the event, but also there, make sure we'll be on scene and getting everybody's testimonies and interviews so we can honor our brother Abdul Wahid Muhammad.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. So yeah, it's going to be here locally in Atlanta, local events. So we're just telling people, and definitely you can, broadcast from this so people can see it. They're putting it together now, and I thought about it because he's here today, and he's done a great work, and no greater work has been done beyond Minister Farrakhan. And I pray a lot that he can do great work and to free us and get us free from this beast that we're under. Be liberated, separate us.
Yes, sir. On that positive note, assalamu alaikum, Brother Stephen.
Wa alaikum salam. And bless you and your family, your
Thank
sisters,
you,
your brother.
Thank you very much.
Your father.
Yes, sir.
Your aunts and uncles, all of them that I know, just tell them all I said hello. May Allah continue to bless them because you have a blessed family.
Praise be to Allah. Same to you, sir. This is Jocelyn
Yes,
Muhammad signing off for the People's Podcast. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for watching.
Wa alaikum salam.
Until